What's happening, everybody? Glad to see you guys here. I'm Pragmatic Addict, and this is my review for The Black Phone. So I was actually, funny story, I was actually supposed to be dropping this review on the 8th. I actually had the chance to go to this screening that I went to tonight, last week on the 8th, and I was supposed to see Lightyear, tonight. This should be the Lightyear review, and I should have already done this review a week ago, but it wasn't until like the 10th where I checked my emails and I'm like, oh wow, I could see this movie in -2 days. Oh, whoops. So I had to do it today. But I gotta say, guys, as far as a theater experience goes, this movie genuinely felt like a thrill ride. This felt more like an actual thrill ride than it did a movie. And I don't know if I've ever actually said that up front about a film. So yes, The Black Phone, like I was saying, it centers on Ethan Hawke. He plays a child abductor and murderer called the Grabber, and it takes place in this neighborhood, in this, this kind of area, kind of like how the movie It plays out with Pennywise and Derry. It remains in this kind of area, and basically what ends up happening is his latest victim, this kid that he kidnaps, the kid, while he is trapped in the Grabber's lair, in the Grabber's basement, he is actually able to talk to the past victims that have died, the past kids, through a black phone. But the Grabber actually states that this phone does not work. So this kid is able to get phone calls that only he can hear through these past victims, these kids, that are trying to help him escape. So a really interesting fact, before I really delve into this, is that, so this is actually adapted from a Joe Hill novel. And if you don't know who Joe Hill is, he is actually, he is a horror author, but he is the son of the legendary Stephen King. So, right off the bat, like, I knew that this was adapted from a Joe Hill book, but it wasn't until, like, maybe last week when I was actually at Barnes & Noble and I saw the book, and I, like, passed by it. And then I walk back and I'm like, this is a Joe Hill novel. And I heard, nothing but absolutely fucking rave reviews about The Black Phone. So, without further ado, let's get into this review. So right off the bat, this film does really good with kind of capturing this, like, summer kind of feel to it. And it does really well with making this neighborhood actually feel like this kind of community. And a lot of that is actually due to how good these child actors are. And not just the brother and sister of the movie, but, yes, especially them, but just the whole, again, community, the whole school kids. Which I will say this, you actually do see a fair amount of, characters in this movie as far as, the kids go. And not just, the victims, but, actual characters that, again, it kind of feels like the movie It, in a sense, but except you actually see, a whole school of kids, and they actually do, far more good to the story, and far more, for the movie than I was actually expecting it to. And they actually work well with, making this movie, work more. One thing I did like about this movie, which this is going to be a very kind of, strange thing to say, but it almost felt like a horror version of Dazed and Confused. I'm not 100% sure, what year this film actually takes place in, but it is, I want to say, around, the 70s or so. And, again, going back to, the kind of, the children's characters, all of them, it really feels like that. I mean, how they set this film up, and how it feels, and how, nostalgic, and how well they captured the essence of everything, and how there's all these different kids that feel so vastly different but connect so well in so many different ways. It was just right off the bat, I was like, holy shit. I don't know if they've gotten a whole kid thing going as well as they have with this since It or Stranger Things. It was really solid stuff, and it really, again, felt like this actual community, this actual school. You felt like you kind of were there, you felt like you got where this kind of setting took place. You felt like you were part of this community. And that's what I really admired about it right off the bat. Just as a storytelling piece and as a setup, this film did phenomenal with that. And now going back to the brother and sister, the main kid characters of the movie, more or less, they were so sweet together. It was there was such a good chemistry between them. They were so compatible in all the right ways. Just as like siblings, like characters, it could not have worked any better between these actors, you know? And of course, you know, yes, they are great. They did give, you know, really good performances as these characters, but the dynamic between them, it was insane. The whole like build up and whole like setting and setup and introduction of this movie and everything, just like getting everything, you know, just getting you familiar with everything, it couldn't have done any of that any better. Which goes further into like what I want to talk about, and that is that I was really pleasantly surprised with how much time and how much they actually crafted into making this setting come to life. Again, it felt like there was a genuine story to tell here, you know, and you really did feel like you were part of this community, and I loved it. Now, one thing I will say is that this has a lot of comparisons to it, you know, from the whole community thing that I've been talking about with the kids and everything, which it does very much feel a lot like how that film felt. But even just like in the sense of like the grabber, like I gotta say, like Pennywise, he's got some competition. He's got a competitor with like I don't know which was more of like an iconic intro, and I'm serious. Like between the grabber's intro and Pennywise's with Georgie and the drain scene, I don't know, man. it leaves up for a pretty solid debate. I'm just gonna say that. And again, much like it, you know, this is set in one community where this child abductor and child murderer, you know, named the Grabber, is, you know, kidnapping and killing these kids in this, you know, neighborhood, in this, you know, area. And, you know, the numbers are just, you know, spiraling and getting out of hand. And basically where this film really takes off is that our main character, Finney is his name, he ends up, you know, becoming the latest victim again, and his sister she actually has these dreams that relate to the Grabber's, like, you know, lore and the whole backstory of like the town in that kind of sense. So I think that like as a whole, this is right off the bat, it's a very straightforward kind of like horror film. It does right off the bat has like some things where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a horror film. This is the next big horror film. But like what I'm gonna get to eventually is like how surprisingly a lot of that actually works. So again, the sister of Finney, you know, she has these dreams that, you know, are actually, you know, alarming because she's having these dreams and these visions that are putting a lot of these pieces together and are making a lot of sense, and you only would know if you were actually there. So, you know, once her brother gets kidnapped, the detectives and everything kind of like use her dreams and her visions to kind of like track down, you know, this whole hideout of the Grabber. And while that is going on the other hand, Finney is actually using the black phone that is in the room with him that just happens to be there, where Ethan Hawke is like, well, you know, it doesn't work, so, you know, good luck. have at it. It doesn't work. But he keeps hearing ringing that only he can hear, and whenever he answers the phone, it is a past victim of the Grabber who is, you know, whether they're giving him tips or giving him advice, you know, telling him, you know, like what's really cool about this film is that it kind of felt more like a cat and mouse film than anything. Like they're telling him, you know, like they're telling like Finney, like, hey, don't do this, it's a test, or, you know, don't go up there because then this is gonna happen. It's happened to every other kid. Or if you want to get through this night, you have to do it this way. So they're giving him these tips and giving him advice to kind of like not only, you know, escape, but to actually survive and like grow an actual like connection with this Grabber. And so how it does things like right off the bat, like how it all like connects, it's like it's very up in the air. Like it does sound kind of corny and kind of like ridiculous, but how well it actually fuses everything together was really like surprising in my opinion. And yes, you know, the film does have some interesting tonal choices, and it does have, you know, its share of, you know, characters' decisions that make you want to yell at the screen, and there is plenty of jump scares. You know, there are times where it kind of brings in some humor that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. it's your very straightforward next horror film that's going to be in theaters. And going back to like the tonal issues real quick, like, you know, there are things as far as like how like the film goes forward and everything where things are kind of like laid out like sometimes more or less for like shock value or just for like dramatic effect, where things get really out of hand and are, you know, thrown to some really bizarre levels just, you know, to give the movie that much more, that sometimes feel a little bit ridiculous. You know, like for example, how this little girl has these dreams. You know, she's got the cliche typical like abusive dad, and because of like, you know, her visions and everything in her dreams, you know, the cops are always coming over and asking her questions and wanting to like, you know, stop by the house, and the dad obviously, you know, doesn't like that. So it's got a lot of like, you know, very cliche issues to it, but in saying that, especially like, you know, with all these you know, criticisms, the acting and the characters are consistently good. And with the characters, especially like, you know, the grabber played by Ethan Hawke and Finley, like, this is gonna sound strange, but like Ethan Hawke, like as the grabber, he's like the perfect child abductor for a horror movie. Like, he's got this kind of like childlike side to him, and you know, the things that he says, like he is very manipulative, and you know, you can tell that he's, you know, got some experience with kids, and you know, he studies them, and you know, how he tried connecting and how he like actually, you know, and like between his chemistry and Finley's, it was, again, going back to it was very much how like Pennywise, you know, lures these kids in. Now the whole movie as just a horror film, you can really tell that this is from the same director as Sinister. It does have its kind of grainy, retro, like snuff kind of like shots to it. There are some jump scares that I swear to God were pulled directly out of Sinister. It does follow this kind of like, you know, detective crime scene kind of like, you know, thriller, cat and mouse kind of horror film. And James Ransone is back. Yeah, Eddie and from It and the guy from Sinister. Jesus Christ, it's like Sinister and It like together made this movie. And you know, yes, while the premise alone is kind of confusing and again ridiculous, where the film actually kind of saves itself more or less is not only like how well like surprisingly everything actually like wraps together, but how they actually do that. Like, I wouldn't call it like predictable or really unpredictable, but more, I guess, just like proper. Like, while a lot of stuff in this movie is pretty, you know, straightforward and kind of ridiculous, and you can only really give it so much justice to an extent, I do think that they do, you know, for the most part, okay with that. And yeah, I'll say this, it is a more grounded and more, you know, well-structured film than Sinister, in my opinion. Like, again, it felt more like a thrill ride than an actual film. And lastly, closing up with my thoughts on this, the ending. So the ending, it is just an all-out, like, you know, crowd pleaser. It is very cinematic. It is very climatic, and especially its tones and where the film goes from everything and how it's paced, like, piece by piece. The movie itself is pretty up and down in a lot of ways, but once it hits to this ending, it really could not have gone any better. This is a really smooth ending. Overall, guys, I think I'm going to give The Black Phone at least a solid 5 out of 10. I thought it was alright, but I was more mixed on it than anything. And, you know, and honestly, like, I wanted to come out of this movie saying, this is the best horror film I've seen in years. But I'm just going to tell you guys, you know, like, yeah, this is a movie for audience. A lot of people are going to like this movie, and it does a lot of things, I think, pretty well, regardless of its flaws. But it is, you know, at the end of it all, it is another, you know, horror film. You know, it's another big, you know, Hollywood horror film. And, you know, with saying that, yes, it does improve a lot of things on Sinister, and, you know, in a lot of ways it borrows a lot of things from Sinister. But as a grounded and, again, structured, you know, film with, you know, thrills, it's got plenty of that. And, you know, I think that audience are, you know, going to have a lot of fun with it. So yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review on The Black Phone. This movie does release June 24th, so once that movie comes out, I'd love to hear what you guys thought about it down here in the comments. And also let me know what you guys thought about the video. So I am going to be seeing Lightyear tomorrow. So look forward to that, guys. But that's going to do it for this review. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and thank you so much for watching. Be safe, everybody.